There is a conversation that almost never happens at school. Not in high school, not in college, not in the professional world where you spend the first decade of your adult life learning how to do a job well enough to keep it. The conversation about how money actually works. Not the mechanics of it, how to open a bank account or fill out a tax return. The deeper principles. The rules that govern how wealth is built, protected, compounded, and ultimately transferred from people who do not understand them to people who do. Most people spend their entire lives inside a financial system they never fully understand. They earn, they spend, they save a little if there is something left over. They worry about money constantly while simultaneously doing very little that changes their fundamental relationship with it. Today we are going through 7 of those rules. Not all of them are complicated. Some of them are almost embarrassingly simple on the surface. But simple is not the same as easy. Welcome to Clux One Finance. Let us get into it. Before we get into the rules themselves, I want to address something that most financial content gets wrong about wealth building. And getting this wrong leads people to focus on the wrong things for years before they figure out what actually matters. Most financial advice is transactional. Buy this fund, use this credit card, open this account, follow this budget template. The transactional advice is not wrong exactly, but it addresses the surface of wealth building without touching the foundation. And foundations are what everything else stands on. The people who follow every transactional tip they encounter without developing the underlying principles tend to make inconsistent progress. They optimize one area of their finances while ignoring others. They make good decisions in good times and bad decisions in stressful ones. They never develop the mental framework that makes financial decisions feel clear and obvious rather than confusing and anxiety-inducing. The 7 rules we are about to discuss are that framework. Rule number 1 is pay yourself first always. And I know you have heard this before. I know it sounds simple. I know it feels like the kind of advice that gets printed on inspirational calendars. But I want you to understand why this rule is first on this list and why virtually every serious wealth builder across every income level and every financial background operates by this principle above almost everything else. The default financial structure of modern life, as we have discussed in previous videos, is designed to spend. Money arrives. Bills are due. Life presents opportunities and obligations in a continuous stream. And in that environment, saving last trying to find what is left over after everything else has been paid produces reliably poor results for the vast majority of people, regardless of how much they earn or how disciplined they believe themselves to be. The leftover almost never materializes in the amount needed. Something always fills the available space. Paying yourself first inverts this structure entirely. Before any bill is paid, before any discretionary spending happens, before you have a chance to see the money and make decisions about it, a predetermined percentage moves automatically into savings, investing, or debt payoff. The spending budget is built around what remains, not the other way around. The specific percentage matters less than the habit. Starting at 10% and building upward is more valuable than waiting until you can save 30%. Rule number 2 is make your money work while you sleep. This rule is about the fundamental difference between active income and invested capital. And understanding it at a deep level changes how you think about every dollar you earn and every dollar you spend. Active income is the money you earn by trading your time for it. Your salary, your freelance income, your hourly wages. Active income is valuable. It is how most people build the initial capital that makes everything else possible. But active income has a ceiling defined by the number of hours in a day and the rate at which your time can be exchanged for money. You can increase the rate by developing valuable skills or building a business. But you can never work more than 24 hours in a day, and you will not work forever. Active income requires your ongoing presence and effort to continue. Invested capital generates returns without requiring your presence, your attention, or your effort on an ongoing basis. Money in a high-yield savings account earns interest while you sleep. Shares of an index fund compound with the growth of the underlying companies, whether you are watching or not. A rental property generates cash flow from tenants paying down a mortgage on an asset that may also be appreciating in value. Rule number 3 is never lose money. This is Warren Buffett's first rule of investing, and when most people hear it for the first time, they dismiss it as either obvious or impossible. Of course, you do not want to lose money. But it is actually neither obvious nor impossible. It is a principle that, when taken seriously, fundamentally changes how you evaluate financial decisions and what kinds of risks you are willing to take. Most people think about investment decisions in terms of upside. How much can I make? What is the return if this works? That framing leads to taking risks that are not justified by the potential reward. It leads to chasing high return opportunities without fully evaluating the downside scenario. And it leads to the kinds of losses that not only cost you the money you lost. Rule number 4 is your income ceiling is your own fault. And I want to be very careful about how I frame this one, because I am not talking about the very real structural inequalities that create genuinely different starting points and opportunities for different people. Those are real. They matter. They are not the subject of this rule. This rule is specifically addressed to the very large group of people who are operating well below their own realistic earning potential, not because of structural barriers, but because of mindset limitations, comfort zone avoidance, and the deeply human tendency to confuse familiarity with inability. Rule number 5 is buy assets, not lifestyle. This rule is the one that most visibly separates people who are building real wealth from people who appear wealthy but are not. And in an era of social media where the performance of wealth has never been more accessible, more tempting, or more culturally rewarded, it is also the rule that is hardest to follow consistently. An asset is something that puts money into your pocket on an ongoing basis or that appreciates in value over time. Stocks, real estate, a business, intellectual property that generates royalties, a skills investment that increases your earning power. These are assets. They work for you. They compound. They grow in value or generate cash flow. The trap of lifestyle inflation is that it accelerates automatically with income growth if you are not actively managing it. Every raise, every bonus, every new job at a higher salary naturally generates pressure to upgrade your lifestyle proportionally. Bigger apartment, better car, more restaurants, nicer vacations. Each individual upgrade is defensible. Together, they ensure that the additional income disappears into lifestyle rather than compounding into assets. And the person who earns $200,000 and spends $190,000 is objectively in a worse financial position than the person who earns $70,000 and invests $20,000 of it every year. The income gap is real. The wealth building gap runs in the opposite direction. The rule is not to live miserably. It is not to deny yourself all enjoyment. It is to be deliberate about the sequencing. Buy the assets first. Let them compound. Let the cash flow and appreciation generated by your assets fund the lifestyle upgrades over time. This sequence produces both genuine wealth and genuine financial security simultaneously. The reverse sequence, upgrade the lifestyle now. Build the assets, later, produces the appearance of wealth alongside financial fragility that most people never admit to themselves until a job loss, a medical emergency, or an economic downturn forces the conversation. Rule number 6 is protect what you build. Wealth accumulation and wealth preservation are two different skills. And most financial content focuses almost entirely on the first, while treating the second as an afterthought. But a single catastrophic financial event, a serious illness without adequate insurance, a lawsuit without liability protection, a death without estate planning, a job loss without an emergency fund, a market crash navigated without the psychological preparation to stay the course, can destroy years or even decades of careful wealth building in a very short period of time. The wealthier you become, the more you have to protect, and the more sophisticated the protection needs to be. But the basic layer of protection, an emergency fund covering 3 to 6 months of expenses, appropriate health and disability insurance, term life insurance if others depend on your income, liability coverage on your home and auto policies, and a basic understanding of what happens to your assets if you become incapacitated or die is not optional. It is the foundation upon which everything else is built safely. Every year you operate without adequate protection is a year where a single bad event can erase the progress of the years that preceded it. The emergency fund that feels like idle money sitting in a savings account doing nothing is actually doing the most important job in your financial life. It is ensuring that a car repair, a medical bill, a temporary job loss, or an unexpected expense does not force you to sell investments at a loss, take on high-interest debt, or derail the financial plan you have been executing. Insurance feels like a waste of money right up until the moment it is the only thing standing between you and financial devastation. And as your wealth grows, the protection conversation evolves. Tax-advantaged account structures, business liability separation, estate planning, trust structures. The specific tools evolve with the level of wealth being protected, but the principle is constant at every level. Whatever you have built is worth protecting with the same seriousness you brought to building it. Rule number 7 is play a long game that nobody else is playing. And this is the rule that, more than any other, explains the vast majority of the wealth gap between people who build genuine financial security and people who perpetually feel like they are almost there but never quite arrive. We live in a culture of immediate gratification that has been turbocharged by technology. Same-day delivery, instant streaming, immediate feedback on every social post. The speed of modern life has compressed our psychological sense of what a reasonable time frame for results looks like. People start a savings plan and expect to feel financially secure in 3 months. They begin investing and check their portfolio every day, treating a 6-month return as meaningful information about whether the strategy is working. They start a business and give it 6 months before deciding it failed. The timelines people operate on have compressed dramatically, while the timelines on which real wealth is built have remained exactly the same as they have always been. Real wealth is built in decades, not months. The compounding that makes an ordinary person's retirement account into a genuinely life-changing amount of money requires 20, 30, or 40 years of consistent contribution and reinvestment. A business that becomes genuinely valuable typically requires 5 to 10 years of building before it produces the kind of returns that make the early years seem worthwhile. And now let us talk about why all 7 of these rules working together produce something greater than any of them produces alone. Because the real power of these principles is not in their individual application. It is in their interaction. Paying yourself first generates capital. Making that capital work generates compound returns. Never losing money ensures those returns accumulate rather than getting periodically erased. Growing your income increases the amount being saved and invested. Buying assets instead of lifestyle ensures income growth translates into net worth growth rather than lifestyle inflation. Protecting what you build ensures that a single bad event cannot unwind years of progress. And playing a long game gives all of the above enough time to compound into outcomes that feel almost magical, even though they are entirely the product of ordinary principles applied with extraordinary consistency. None of these rules requires a high income to start applying. None of them requires a perfect financial history or a pristine credit score or a prestigious education. They require a decision to operate differently, to take the long view when the short view is screaming for attention, to prioritize building over spending, to protect what you create, to grow what you earn, to invest what you save, and to keep doing all of those things long after the initial motivation has faded and the discipline itself has become the identity. The people quietly getting rich around you are not doing anything you could not do. They are just doing it consistently, patiently, and according to a set of rules that most people never learn. Now you have learned them. The rest is just execution. Subscribe to Cluxy Finance if you have not already. Hit the bell notification so you catch every video we release. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. And I will see you in the next one.